Hello, and welcome to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for tonight's talks. We have three amazing talks coming up for you today. But before we jump into those, I want to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall or water scrumfall projects to autonomous empowered product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because when you're in a high change environment, it doesn't make sense to build a team, get them really expert in one area, but then disband that team and move them somewhere else. If you're in companies that I've worked in where there's over 100 kind of simultaneous projects running at any given time, it makes sense to have teams that are kind of static in one particular area where they can really learn what are the needs of the customer, what are the business goals, and to be able to iterate to make kind of solutions that work to meet both of those objectives. Now, that's really easy to say, but it's really hard to put into practice. So that's where these talks come in. Now, each talk isn't going to cover the entire kind of life cycle of building a product, but we invite people to share what they're doing in their space and how they're changing or improving their ways of working in their part of the process so that you can think about how you could apply that in your context and what you could hopefully bring back to your companies. So please do think of questions that you have and ask those questions, whether it's in the right side here on UXDX.com or if it's in the chat in YouTube, in whichever platform you're watching this on. We'll be monitoring all of those different places. So please do ask any questions that you have, and we'll put those questions to the speakers. Now, sometimes we can't get through every question. So please, if we don't, we'll put those into the UXDX Slack group, into the Ask the Speakers channel. And we'll invite the speakers to come in there and answer those questions that we don't have time to get through during the event tonight. But that's enough for me. You're not here to listen to me talk. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening. And that would be Mislav, who's the head of design at Cinnamon. And Mislav will be talking about creating an optimized team based on their vision and their skills. So welcome, Mislav.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hope you're okay and you're enjoying this nice afternoon, at least on my side. Today I would like to share with you a few insights and practices that we have started here and which actually helped us quite a lot to kind of get the benchmark on our whole design team department and see what works and what doesn't. So without further ado, I'll just kind of dive straight into it. So what we'll talk about today is how the inception of the idea that was in my head, how it was before we even started to think of implementing something like this, how we actually tackled the problem of the whole process of optimizing our design department and having some form of a skill map per each person. And finally, I'll go over the next steps that are in our plans and something that I think is required to do once you have those foundations laid out. But before we jump into it, just so you know who you're listening to, my name is Mislav. I'm currently head of design at Cinnamon, and I've been head of design for the past 14 months here. Previously, I worked for 6 years as a product designer. And let's say if I were to say my niche, my specialty in product design would be conducting UX research and setting foundations, which could be done through various workshops with clients and research, market, stuff like that. So where the whole idea of a skill map started? Well, it started more than 15 years ago. I don't know if you know or not, if you recognize this image. Basically, this is from Pro Evolution Soccer, PlayStation 2 game. And I used to play it a lot with my older brother. I mean, he would always kick my butt in this, but all in all, it was always fun. But something stayed with me. As you can see the map in the top part of the screen, it shows a few things. It shows the most important skills or areas that certain player is regarded in. It shows their strengths and weaknesses, but it also gives us a baseline to compare with other players. Why is it important? Because if you look at it as soccer players, it's not that different from having your designers on the team. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone's better at something while not that experienced in other areas. It helps us understand team competences. We can see where we are strong, but also it can help us identify weak spots in our team. But most importantly, it can help us choose the best team for the job. So if you have a project that requires extensive research and then you have to do a spectacular UI in the end, you can combine few people from your team to do the work instead of having just one person do everything by themselves. So how it was before this whole initiative and the whole process started at Cinnamon. To do that, we have to go a bit back in time. I would go 5 years when I first joined Cinnamon. Back then, there was five designers on the team that amounted to 27% of the total company. We had 0 team leads at that moment, and we had 1 head of design. But the process, something that wasn't so visible from the outside, is that we had 0 documentation. Like nothing was written. We had 0 documents. All the processes were kind of passed down, and like we all knew how to do something, for example a user flow, but it was not unified approach, it was not unified knowledge that was shared. And also we had 0 seniority, so everyone was just a designer. This was a quote from our former HR manager when I was kind of getting to know her, and I was just kind of telling her about my work and the work that we do in the department. And she asked me like, okay, do you have seniors, juniors, stuff like that? I was like, yes and no. Like we don't have seniorities per se, but we know, we play it by the ear if you know who's more experienced and who's less experienced. That was an issue for us because it was not easy to create their professional development plan, to know where they can be, where they are at the moment, and stuff like that. Now in 2023, we have 20 people in the department, which amounts to 20% of our company. We have 3 team leads and still 1 head of design. But in the background, what happened in the past 5 years, we created the handbook, which is kind of a holy grail of our department. We have everything written out in detail, and basically the whole handbook kind of spans out and is extended to 35 plus documents that are linked within the handbook that explain the whole design process in detail, so everyone is on the same page, but also all the processes that happen internally, such as mentorship, face-to-face check-ins, stuff like that. But also now we have a clear design letter which kind of showcases all the levels that we have within the department and what needs to be done to get to the next level. But we had almost everything, but one detail was basically missing. And that was, how can we actually help people? How do we help designers go from one seniority level to another? And specifically, how do we make it more personalized for them based on their current skills, based on where they want to be, what they want to work, what they want to specialize in, and stuff like that. This was something that was drew on a whiteboard as like a desirable outcome. We were hoping to achieve increased retention rate, because as you show people that you invest your time and energy into their advancement and their progress, it actually will help them feel more valued and will feel more inclined to stay for a longer time, because they can see the perspective and you can basically align your visions. Also, it would help us hire more precisely, because we would shape the whole recruitment process based on the needs and wants of our department and based on the weak spots that we have. And of course, create individual professional plan for each and every designer that's in our department. So now the sweet part, how the whole process looked like. Step 1 was basically defining the stack. The stack is a list of skills that we deemed important for each designer to have within our department. Something that you always tackle first is the technical skills, the hard skills, as they say. but I would urge you and recommend to go beyond not just the technical skills, but look at let's say, people skills, soft skills, something that help them as people, not designers only. So this is how it looked. We had ability to plan, we had innovative, we had research, we had lean thinking, we had user focus, and then we had 30 plus more skills. I think in the end there was 40-ish skills, but on the slide I can only fit, I think, 30 or something like that. And that was too much. Like, it's hard to, it's not easy to define all of these skills and also define all the levels of those skills, but also it's almost impossible to rate someone on all of these skills. So the next logical step in this whole process was to make a selection of the most important skills, of the skills that we want to create foundation with. And also, as you do create those, as you select those skills, as you hash them out, you will see certain patterns create, certain groups being formed. So from this, we went to this. And from this, we went to this. What it all now happened is basically that you get 3 coherent groups of skills. The first one being technical, second one being supplementary, and the third one being culture. What is important here is that technical skills are strictly focused around the work they do as a designers. Supplementary skills is something that can be applied across the board. It's something that can be applied in sales team or marketing or development, anything that helps them do their job, but it's not tied to their skills they need to perform as a designer. So as you would have, for example, for supplementary skills, you would have mentoring, development knowledge, ability to learn quickly, having a business sense, communication, and time management. And the last pillar, the last group, is culture, which was devised from our core values that we set 2 years ago, I think, at the design department, where we know what type of people we want to attract. We know what type of people we want to hire to be part of our department. So this is something that will help us kind of identify those skills, those traits in someone. So as we have now those 3 groups, something needs to be fine-tuned a bit. So here I had an issue with discovery. I had issue with research, prototyping, and interaction. Discovery was not, I would say it wasn't precise enough. It didn't give a sense of what it includes. Research was too broad subject. As you know, you have qualitative research, quantitative research, and those are quite different paths someone can take. So we had to kind of see what we can do about it. While on the other hand, prototyping and interaction for the work that we do seem too small items to be standalone. So in the end, we got to product discovery. We had quantitative and qualitative research as separate items, but then we merged interaction and prototyping into one. Supplementary skills stayed as they were originally formed, while the culture we added clearly communicates idea. Now, if you notice in the second column, the last second to last item is communication, while we have here clearly communicates idea. Basically, what we wanted to do with such difference, because the ability to communicate well with those around you, with sensitivity to timeliness, medium, brevity, and tone, especially when it comes to wild concepts that designers have in their head, something where you want to explain to a client, to your colleague, but it's very specifically tied to a design problem at hand. So we want to kind of divide that as something that it's ingrained in our culture to basically be able to always speak about your design ideas, your concepts, your thoughts around the issue at hand. So there, now we have all three groups. In total, we had 20 skills. The step number 3 to how we can approach once you have defined your stack, once you have divided them into coherent groups, is basically do evaluation. and in the end, synthesize the results of your findings, of your of implementing that process into your team. Evaluation was done on few levels. The first one was self-evaluation, where we had like a 30-minute call with each designer where we asked them to evaluate themselves based on the skills. Each skill had 4 levels, from novice to advanced, and each level was explained in the same way. So we didn't have to create 80 explanations. We had to create 20 explanations for skills, so 1 explanation per skill, and also to add to that 4 explanations for each level. So we want to kind of unify that to not do the extra legwork, but also to make it more simple and more concise and more optimized to be implemented in other departments within the company. Then we had a team lead evaluation where I had to sit down with their team lead to kind of talk about their progress. Were they able to objectively assess themselves, or did they were they overconfident or underconfident about their skill set and stuff like that? And then basically do the same thing in 6 to 12 months. Even though it says 6 to 12 months here, I would suggest doing it in 12 months, because 6 months might not be enough time for someone to basically work with that intensive on their skills. So once you have all of that mapped up, once you have your stack, your categories, and you've done your evaluation, this is what you get. You get a skill map. So this is a technical skills only at the moment, where you can see how different people have different shapes. As you know, that the saying people come in all shapes and sizes, well, that is true. Something for us that's not important for us to have everyone being full circle, because that's not attainable, and it's very, you put a lot of pressure on people to actually be able to cover a lot of ground. And you can see that some people excel at one area while having less experience or skill set in the other area, which is totally fine. But as I said in my first slides, you can easily identify strengths and weaknesses within your team. When it comes to supplementary skills, this is also something that you'll get as part of this process, is that you'll be able to see who people rally around, who's a good mentor, who has a good business sense, understands the core business of the products easily, and can kind of help them on the business side as not only doing the design work. And finally, you have the culture skills. Let's call them skills. This is something that we actually expect to be at least 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4, because that's exactly the type of people that you wanted to have in your team in your first place. So this is something that once you have the whole selection process of hiring, once you understand that and see that someone might not fit in this map, let's call it like that, you might think more about hiring them, because how could they fit in your team? Will they fit in your team? If they don't fit that much, can you still work with them? And if so, what do you need to do to be able to work with them as you would work with others that are currently within your team? So once you do the evaluation, and now you have to kind of synthesize the whole process and all the findings that you had, you get a cross section of the whole department. As we mentioned earlier, you get all the areas that you excel at as a department, as a team, but also you can see easily weaknesses of your team. Identifying weaknesses can help you achieve better hiring plan to reach it, but also it can help you create a revised hiring plan. Like you can easily then go back to the drawing board and kind of go over all the questions that you have in your technical interview, even perhaps maybe if you have a design task that you can kind of adjust to find that specific skill in someone in your candidates that are currently in the pipeline. In the end, you get this. So this is the whole cross section per pillar, basically, where you can easily see in the first map that Interaction prototyping is something that we have, let's say in this example, one person excels at while the other two are not that experienced in it. So maybe we can it can help us bring those people to a 3 or to a 2 out of 4. But also something interesting as we integrated mentoring as a supplementary skill by pairing two people to kind of give them a chance to transfer their knowledge and experience in one skill where a mentor excels. They automatically increase their mentoring skills further. So it's not only about technical skills, but they also advance in their soft skills, their supplementary skills, as we have it here. So it's both in a communication, it's both in mentoring skills. So something that help us kind of increase skills across multiple dimensions. And once you have all of that, this is something that could be in your agenda for next steps. At least it was for us. Basically, you track individual progress across 12 months. You ask them like, where do they want to be in 12 months? What kind of shape they want to have in 12 months? And it can help you kind of give them more personalized development plan. It can help you have a retrospective on the hiring process, like are all the hires that we have in the past 12 months, were they good hires? If not, what should we change? How should we change it? And stuff. Basically work a lot of things around the whole skill map process. And as we mentioned in my previous slide, basically create mentoring pairs, which is something that we have implemented in the past 6 months, where regardless of someone's years of experience, so let's say someone has 2 years of experience as a product designer, they still excel at certain skill, and they can still transfer their knowledge of that skill and experience to people who are maybe, generally speaking, more experienced than them, but did not have a chance to, they weren't exposed to that skill to be able to learn it that quickly. So you can create mentorship pairs where people, regardless of their experience, can learn from each other and basically increase their knowledge in technical skills. They can increase their experience with supplementary skills such as communication, mentorship, also time management, because if you're a mentor, you need to manage your time properly and stuff like that. As a small takeaway from this presentation, identify strengths and weaknesses. It can help you give you a bird's eye view of where you are and help you give perspective on where you want to be. Because if you know your current situation and you know where you want to be in 12 months as a team, you can easily identify those weak spots and work on them and kind of fill in the holes and help you achieve more optimized team that you are leading. It will lead to more precise hiring because you would create a customized hiring plan based on the skill and the need that you're trying to find. It will increase retention rate because you will be able to create a personalized development plan for each and everyone based on their skill set they currently possess, combined with the skill set they want to have, and combined finally with a vision where you want your team or your department to be in the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months. And finally, I would say give more purpose and have a clear vision. Once you give a purpose to your team, they will be more comfortable coming to work. They'll be more comfortable being part of the team, being next to their teammates and feel like they belong where they are right now. And in the end, once you do know where your people want to be in 12 months, you will actually know where your whole department will be in 12 months. And that's about it for me today. Hope it was interesting. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, place a comment on Slack or here. I'll answer it as soon as I can. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mislav. That was really interesting. I found it kind of quite interesting how detailed you've managed to go into like 20 or how many did you say in the end that you had done in different areas?
Excuse me, skills. Yeah, now we
Skills,
have
yeah.
20 skills. 8 of them are technical, 6 supplementary, and 6 culture skills.
Excellent. So it's quite a bit of detail. And that actually leads us into the first question that Emerson has asked. Do you think this level breakdown HR usually try to apply is detrimental to the development of some professionals?
This is something that once I started doing that, I wasn't sure how to approach it in regards to collaboration with our HR team, because I didn't want to make it feel it was corporate thing. I didn't want to make it feel that it was something that board or anyone wanted to kind of imply on them. It was something that I wanted to showcase as our initiative within the department to create it that can help people upgrade their skills. As if you look at it on a high level as a process itself, which can be implemented through HR professionals, this is something that if you do it as optimize the whole process to make it more universal, to apply it across multiple departments, multiple teams, so you don't have to do all the legwork again and again and again. And this is something as we have implemented in design, other departments kind of start to catch up on it. And so far, I have no idea at the moment how far along they came with it, but they know that they can always kind of contact me if they need any help with it, if they need any support from my end. And that's about it. Yeah. I honestly hope I was able to answer the question. I didn't see the question in writing, so
Yeah, I think the assumption in the question, the way I read it, is that HR was the driving factor behind
no,
this.
no,
Whereas I
no.
think what you're
This was
saying is that
purely our own initiative that happened within the department. Something we want to kind of show other people within the company what can be done with if you have such group of people that you lead, where they really want to work constantly on upgrading their skills, and it's not something that, as I said, like was imposed by HR or board members or anyone else. It was purely our own initiative to do it.
great. And I guess does that tie in with promotions and levels? Do you have a kind of a thing that it's you have to be at a minimum here or something like that? And isn't there always going to be an area where one or two people are just naturally not, it's not their area of
This
focus?
wasn't that much tied to a level of seniority per se, because that can be done much more easily if you're a product firm. So you know that everyone you're looking for in a product firm, let's say you have a design department, you have research department, then you know that you have dedicated kind of a skill set per department. Where you have diverse people working in an agency environment, it's not easy to tie certain skills to a levels, because as I've said, like you would have people who excel at one area but lack in the other area. And I don't want to be the person to say you have to learn this if you want to get promoted, because that person it's much more valuable to me as they are right now. If they keep increasing and working on the skills they want to work on and upgrading their experience in the skills that they currently have. So it's not something that I want to put them in a form of strict forms to have it as a mandatory thing to get promoted. Promotion happens strictly based on their performance and how they do their job. That's it.
Okay, excellent. Emerson, thank you for the answer. The
You're
skills graph
welcome.
is amazing and sheds light on something that we can even apply on ourselves as a framework. So
I'm glad.
excellent. That brings us to time. So thank you very much, Mislav, for sharing
You're
your
welcome.
insights.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So up next, we have Alfi Oloo, who is the product designer for design systems at IoT.nxt, or NXT. I'm not sure which way it is. And he'll be talking about mentorship, the foundation of a healthy design industry. So welcome, Alfi.
Wonderful. Just want to double check. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you perfectly.
All right. So I'm going to be presenting a topic that's very close to my heart, but unfortunately, because we have a limited amount of time, I'm going to cut my heart out of this for the time being, and I'll give you the overview of the story, and then I'd like to present you with a very specific question. And so the place that I'd like to start was around last year, November. So around last year, November, I gave a TEDx talk around the topic of self-directed learning. So I'll give you the 30-second backstory about me and how I came to this point, place and time. So I've always been a somewhat difficult student. I struggled all the way through my education, right up until university or college years, and it would turn out that I'd eventually drop out. But right before I did, I spent about a month job shadowing at one of the banks, and I got to see what designers actually do. And I got to see like all of the hours that I'd spent playing computer games and kind of doing all of these other things. Finally, I'd kind of like seen something that I could do and I could apply those skills to. And suddenly what was such a difficult challenge eventually evolved into something that I've dedicated my life to. And so the main problem that I presented at TEDx, which I'll sort of skip through right until where I left the conversation in that talk. And the question that I put forward is, in a world where technology is advancing at such a crazy rate with artificial intelligence, neural networks, low orbiting satellites, all of these things are kind of pushing the frontier of technology so quickly. There's one question that we have yet to ask. What is the most effective way to pass our knowledge on from one generation to the next? In every conversation we have, there's always, a bit of a cynical perspective about the education system and its future. But we never really nail down an answer of what that might look like. And so I presented the first two foundations of what education might look like as technology and our capabilities develop. Now, every single learning system, regardless of whether it's the onboarding process for a website, the introduction to a game, or the schooling of a child, has three essential foundations. There's a method of learning. This is also called the pedagogy. This is the way that the learner actually engages with the material and with the educator, and which leads you to the educator, which is a person who, if not is more experienced, can create an environment specifically ideal for learning. And the last is the learning material, which is the actual knowledge that you're absorbing. And so in this talk, I kind of took each one and overlaid my experience and the challenges I faced as a student that got in the way of my progress. And the main thing was I would find out along my education process that I was dyslexic. And so because the amount of reading required in the education process only starts to lean more and more into reading, this cycle couldn't really function properly for me. And so I looked at three questions, one for each of those areas of what education might look like if we take on some of the current knowledge and some of the technology that's available to us to further each of these three areas. And so for the first one, I looked at an idea presented by Lev Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development. And it's a way of mapping a person's learning. And I'll just briefly touch over it, because we'll explore it in a little bit more detail further down the line. But it essentially speaks about three zones. The zone of mastered knowledge, the things that you know how to do, the things that don't really need you to use much of your processing power. And then there's this much larger domain of the things that you can't do, even with help, the things that are outside of your capability, and where learning typically focuses in the typical schooling environment. But then Vygotsky speaks about this interesting middle ground, this zone of ideal learning. And the last idea that he adds is the idea of the more knowledgeable other, a person more experienced than the learner. And what the more knowledgeable other does is they actually allow for that zone to expand by creating a domain of that is safe to explore by their influence. And this is a relationship we can see with parents and children, with managers and direct reports in all sorts of places. And so the way that expand on this is that we could probably do a lot for the material that we present in a learning environment if it's focused on the interests and the things that lie within the zone of proximal development, the things that are slightly outside of their capabilities, but with a little bit of effort, they can engage with new ideas and grow their own body of knowledge. And so I call this focusing on adaptive learning material. And the adaptive element is the fact that the content of the learning experience is based on the interests and abilities of the individual, which is what one of the points that was just shared with us. And then the second interesting challenge is needing an agnostic learning method. And my own experience really exemplified this one because the only way really for me to engage with the knowledge was through reading. For the majority of my schooling career, all of that knowledge was out of access. Once I left that environment and I was able to decide for myself how and what I learned, I started to dive into audiobooks, and I pretty much educated myself through my ears. And it's somewhat ironic because even though we think about how much technology has evolved, speech has been the underlying means of transferring knowledge for humanity all the way through history. Like the printing press is really just a blip in the span of that time. And so for a long time, oral tradition was the main form of education. And I essentially took that through my own initiative and following my own interests to build that for myself. And so the next thing that I look at is how could we actually do that? How could we actually systemize this idea that allows a person to learn in a way that they are most comfortable with and capable of? And so I looked at three sort of developmental relationships and how each of them explore a different kind of learning. That of the parent-child relationship. And this is specifically important because the way a baby learns is quite different from the way you learn at school and the way you eventually learn as a professional, because a baby almost learns by just being in the world. There's just sensory stimulation, and that stimulation is giving them more data with which to reference from. And that's how they eventually build things like their first speech. And a very interesting idea around that topic is parents actually instinctively know how to teach a baby to talk, and the way that they do that is using speech and vocabulary that is just above their level. So they'll use, for example, baby talk for an infant that's at that level, but using words that are outside of their vocabulary just by a little bit. And slowly the child starts to build their vocabulary. And the funny thing is, before a child has learned any of the sounds that are necessary for the language, they make all of the possible sounds that you could make to speak a language. But then as they develop and as they learn the specific ones from their parents, they lose the ability to use the ones that aren't within the language that they're learning. And so the interesting thing about this first type of learning relationship is that it focuses on being in the world as the foundation of the learning experience. And then, if we fast forward into the future and the development of knowledge and craft, we look at the relationship between an apprentice and a craftsmaster. Before the Industrial Revolution, you have these set of skilled individuals who have turned a skill into something repeatable and something that provides value to the community. And they would take on this apprentice. And this person would learn by actually following in the footsteps of the craft master. And they would learn by actually doing. And the interesting thing is that the typical apprenticeship would start at around the age of 13. And the apprentice would join the household of the craft master. And he would learn both how to work in the business, but he would also learn what the lifestyle of this person looks like. And so this was an approach to learning that focuses on learning by doing, learning by actually embodying the specific role that the craft master plays. And then if we look into the Industrial Revolution, when guilds and apprenticeships started to dissolve, the need for learning changed, because now we needed a form of learning that could take a non-skilled worker, make them semi-skilled so that they can use a machine to create resources that previously required skilled labor. And so the need for apprenticeship sort of dissolved into society. And I mean, one of the hallmarks, at least here in South Africa, where I'm living, is a lot of the technicons got dissolved or turned into either shut down or turned into universities very soon after South Africa's democracy. And so what that meant is you had this band of very, very hands-on skills that previously required apprenticeships that currently don't have a clear learning path. And there are so many skill sets and crafts that are eventually re-emerging after the Industrial Revolution because the idea of craft specialists is re-emerging. The idea of a UX designer as a specialist is back in, and we cannot simply rely on a waterfall sort of functional production line to create the things that we need to create. And so one of the interesting things that I found when looking at these three forms of learning is that the only one that we don't have, the only one that isn't officially standardized is the idea of learning through practice. We still have our parental relationships, and those are evolving to the modern time, and we still have these sort of schools that do sort of mass education, but there isn't really a foundation or a sense of structure if a person were to simply decide that they didn't want to be educated at school and simply wanted to pick up a craft that they could provide for their community. And so that looks at the adaptive learning method. And the reason why it's adaptive is because you can simply look for a person that practices in the craft that you're interested in to see if that is a place that you can expand on. And the place where I ended this journey last time was on the idea of the educator, because this is probably the hardest one to resolve, because any entrepreneur who's tried to scale any kind of service that requires human engagement will know that it is always the hardest part to scale. And so at the moment, my research is in this domain. How can we actually make education, but specifically the educators, openly accessible to everybody? And there, along the way in my research, there are a couple of different ways that I've explored and that I'm looking at. And I'm going to start from right to left. The first is the idea of an exchange program, and historically that would be a journeyman. A person would go out away from their geographical location to another land and find a craft master in the same discipline as them and learn from them and bring those techniques and knowledge back to their domain. And this is a concept that actually exists in businesses today. There are many businesses that do exchange programs, but they do them internally. So you'll maybe go to another location or another branch and learn from that branch and then eventually come back. And so this is one of the ones that we're exploring. The next is the idea of the apprenticeship. And this one is pretty typical, and people generally know at least roughly what that might look like, from a learnership to an internship and so on. And then lastly is that of a multidisciplinary team. And I'd say this is, second last. And this is probably the one that is the hottest topic right now. You know, in all of our teams, we're stepping a little bit away from the idea of simply having these different design organizations, software engineering organization, product management separately, and sort of starting to bring those skills together into individual squads. And so this is another interesting dynamic. But the one that I'd like to focus on is peer-to-peer mentorship. And the reason for that is because this is one that, if it actually works, it's something that can be available to everybody, because it simply requires you to find somebody who's interested in the same thing, and they don't necessarily need to know more than you. They simply need to have different skills. And so what we're going to explore is how peer-to-peer mentorship is typical from the ideal idea of hierarchic mentorship, or mentorship with a person that's significantly more knowledgeable and a person that's significantly further behind. And what we'll look at is, what are the challenges that are actually faced in those types of mentorship relationships? And what opportunities does peer-to-peer mentorship present that doesn't exist where there's an implied hierarchy? So when we think about mentorship right now, you can almost think about it this thing, there's this magical super Yoda who floats in the background and waits to see where you've got a challenge, and he'll give you advice on all of the important elements of your life, and everything will just work out when he arrives in the nick of time. Now, as great as that looks in movies, it's not necessarily that simple in real life. And so I started to have, around the end of last year, I connected with a very interesting lady named Abby Covert, or she also goes by Abby the AI. And we were talking about the challenges about in hierarchic mentorship and some of the things that actually happened that sometimes cause these relationships to not perform as we might expect. And there were three main ones that we've been speaking about since. And it's this idea of out of context mentorship, when somebody sort of is trying to give advice or trying to give guidance, but they don't have the context of the challenge at hand. And so their help essentially becomes more advice giving rather than actually helping the learning process. And then the imbalance of agency, especially now, this is one that is only bad when it's prolonged, especially when a person is an intern or very new to an environment. Sometimes they do need a lot of guidance and assistance. But the idea should always be, and this is an idea taken from the psychological literature and in therapy, is that you should always be working to give them the ability to deal with things themselves. That is always the end goal. Sometimes you need to step in and help, but the end goal should always be to give them agency. And lastly, every now and then you get a really, really good mentor, and he can actually be that Yoda, but he can only be Yoda to a couple of people. And so they eventually get over leveraged and then perform badly for everybody rather than doing well for the people that are within their capabilities. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. So what I'd like to do is that even that very good mentor can actually sometimes be the not ideal for learning, and how you can actually find that someone closer to where you are can be even more ideal. And it's sort of underpinned by this idea of the 4 stages of knowledge. And these are the stages you go through when you're learning something new. The first is unconscious incompetence. And this is where you don't even really know what you don't know. It's kind of just like there's this idea of, I think a great example is like NFTs, and everybody's heard of them. And, the majority of people actually just think it's, some kind of JPEG online. And it's sort of like you don't even know how far your ignorance goes. But then as soon as you start to read up about the topic, that space sort of expands, and you start to get to understand the things that you need to learn. And then as you learn them, you start to become consciously competent. You actually start to build this body of knowledge that's structured. But then there are those things like, riding a bicycle or breathing or walking, that eventually you've been doing them for so long that you don't even think about them. And what can tend to happen is a mentor who has got all of these great skills to pass on, who looks like they are the ideal person to help you, can actually not be ideal because they are so far experienced in the thing that they are doing that they don't even know how to, that they are unable to lead you through the experience of learning. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of parents find that it is better for their children to be tutored by another student that's further ahead than for them as the parent to tutor their child, because a person around their age group has been through the process a lot more recently. And so what can happen when they're so far apart is skills that they are capable of doing, they aren't actually capable of mentoring, and they are unable to create this zone of exploration for the learner in their zone of proximal development. And so what it actually, the way that I'd like to sort of shift the narrative a little bit is the role of the mentor in the learning of an individual. Now, if we look at these 3 zones from the zone of proximal development, the high-risk area, or the things outside of your capability, the areas that are in the ideal learning zone, and the things that you know how to do. What we can do is, in the zone that is outside of their capability, we create safety, the idea of psychological safety. This is where it belongs. Psychological safety doesn't mean solving all of their problems for them, but instead ensuring that things that are too far and that are too risky are protected against. But the things that can help them grow, we focus on allowing them to try and fail, because they will eventually fail. And lastly, in this area of mastered knowledge, we can encourage them to become a mentor. And so we start to build a network. And through this network, we start to grow this underlying fabric that supports the learning process. And so when you look at a person learning, this is sort of a diagram taken from Japanese tradition from the island of Okinawa, and it's the concept of the ikigai. Some of you will be familiar with it, and I'll just kind of hop over it. If you'd like to get into more detail, I definitely recommend searching it up. But it's a mentorship relationship. You have the idea of the things that the person brings to the table, and those are the things that they are good at, and the ways that they serve their community, or the things that they get paid to do. And then on the other hand, they have the things that they believe the world needs, and the things that they are passionate about. And in the center of all four of these quadrants is what this Japanese tradition believes makes up a life worth living. And this idea is called the ikigai. And so in this peer mentorship experience that I've been exploring with Abby, we've been looking at what might it look like if these two people who are on this learning journey come together to create a learning experience that is in both intrinsically motivating and allows them to tap into that motivation, but also is something that is important and that the world actually needs, so that they're providing something that is of value. And so in this experience, you would establish this mentorship relationship by bringing these two together, and we'd go through a series of exercises that allow you to actually get to know each other at this level. And together, and you'll see that in where two of these quadrants meet, you'll find an element of your life that can be described by those two meetings. For example, where the world has a need and you love something, that is where your life's mission might be. And the things that you're good at and the things that you love, and those might make your life's passion. And so to find this area of shared learning, what we do is we look at the the areas that they are both passionate about, as well as the things that they are capable of doing. And by that, we can look for areas that provide both personal fulfillment, but also leverage their strengths. And by doing that, you can start to create a collaborative learning journey that leverages this positive mentorship. And using diversity of skill and of capability, you can actually allow each other to grow without any one of them being more knowledgeable than the other, but simply leverage diversity to create that growth. And so at this point in time where I am in this research project is about building these types of learning journeys, from apprenticeships to peer-to-peer mentorship to multidisciplinary teams. And one of the things that has really gotten me interested in the idea of focusing on the relationship was one of the greatest stories of mentorship ever. And so in closing, I'd like to do something somewhat different. I'd like you to take a deep breath. And imagine you're standing in the city center with a sea of faces looking up at you. And they are hanging on your every word. For surely, you're the greatest thinker to have walked the face of the earth. And you have dedicated your entire life's work to the development of the youth of Athens. In your talk, in your word, in your deed. And then one day, those that call themselves your enemy, one day they charge you with the most heinous crime, corrupting the youth of Athens. And they sentence you to death. And as you sit there in the final moments of your life, looking back on what you've done, you remember the hours of discussion with your student, Plato, and all of those dialogues. Not a single one did you write, but every single one would be etched into Western tradition forever. And through this mentorship, through this peer-to-peer engagement, the development of human education would be forever marked by the work of Socrates and Socratic dialogue. And I believe with this idea of shared learning and collaborative mentorship, we can create a fabric of education and learning that can prepare us for the present and possibly even for the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's a very powerful ending. So thank you for sharing. I really enjoyed that because I really do think that mentorship is incredibly powerful, and I think it's an area we can invest more in. And I think there's a fantastic overlap with Mislav's talk about like identifying where people are strong and where maybe somebody is weak, and then trying to pair them instead of over relying on a manager. So
exactly. No, that's a very good point.
I had one question though, because you brought up the kind of the different styles, and you mentioned multidisciplinary teams as well as kind of apprenticeships and peer-to-peer. And one thing that's always bothered me about multidisciplinary teams is that often people can be a bit isolated. And what I mean by that is that you might have one designer on the team and you might have one researcher on the team. So how do you try to balance that potential isolation of people with a kind of more of an apprenticeship? Where does that fit in, and where can they learn about their craft in particular?
Okay, so I think that's two different questions almost, and I'm just gonna stop at least go out of presenter mode just so that I can see you. So I think it's a little bit it's you've got two challenges there really, because the one challenge is how do you get this team to grow as like a multidisciplinary team, but then also how do you ensure that the individuals are still building their craft, right? And so I think how you do that, and the way I think Spotify have done an amazing work in this space, but having the idea of having guilds and then having actual production teams, and the guilds are more focused on the actual craft of what they're doing, and the production teams are more focused on producing the whatever the product is. And so what you want to do is ensure that you create learning experiences in both. And this is, I think, the place that we usually get wrong is we focus so much on their development in their craft skill, because that's where they are comfortable, that we don't focus that much on ensuring that the team as a whole learns together. And that's one of the most interesting spaces that I'm looking to explore in the future, because I think the way that you would teach a group like that, or the way that they would learn, is through case studies, because you would need to actually learn by collaborating. With something like design or software engineering, you can go to the specific resources that are about that topic, but there isn't really a lot of material about how does a team come together and learn something. And so I think case studies are a great way to bridge that gap. You get some of your most skilled talent that's most experienced, and you document some of the work that they're doing, and you can actually even then start to share that internally with your other team, and through exercises and sort of like training, like what is it called, mock experiences, you can start to build those same learnings into your teams.
That's a great example, and it ties in nicely with UXDX, because we're all about getting product, UX design, and dev together, because if you want to work together,
it's one of the reasons why I was so keen to do this. Yeah. Not very many people are talking about everything together.
Excellent. Well, I think that brings us to time. So thank you very much for sharing, and I hope everybody out there enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you. Cheers.
So that brings us to our last talk, but last but definitely not least, talk for this evening. And Laura, who's the lead UX designer at Global Relay, will be talking about the power of visual maps to foster cross-discipline collaboration and team alignment. So I'm loving the theme of cross-discipline collaboration. So welcome, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And I actually think that the previous talk is quite related to what I'm talking about, because it's how we make sure that a team is aligned and works together towards the same goal. So in this talk, I'm going to share a series of visual maps that I've used in the past to ensure that a team work together, especially a cross-discipline team. Just a few things about me first. Hopefully it works. Yeah. So my name is Laura Dantonio. I've been in the UX industry for the last 17 years. And I work for different sectors, telco industry, publishing, and finance. And specifically, when I was at Elsevier, I worked for a team of about 50 people. That was one of the biggest team I worked for, and with different disciplines, about 10 disciplines working together. So product manager, back-end and front-end engineer, tester, data scientist, analyst, UX researcher, visual designer, UX designer, strategies, and agile manager. So a really different approach that came together on a unique team. And what I understood based on my experience is that the collaboration of a team and the team alignment, it was paramount. It was of paramount importance. And the way I approach and support collaboration was by using visual maps. But first of all, let me start off by saying why is important the collaboration, and simply is because we can do so much more if we are together as a team. Alone, we can just do so little. And also, it's important as well is that we collaborate across different disciplines. Why? Because we can be more, we can have better results in terms of solution. But it's also becoming important in the time that we're living. Why? Because the problem that we're solving are more complex. And so we really need to bring different people with different points of view to come together and bring their own expertise. So we cannot get away from collaborating across disciplines. Another point that it's important is that once you have teams to get different people together, you have a team. What is important is to make sure that they have a unique vision. They know what they're aiming to do. And that is because a team that is successful is a team that has many hands and one mind. They have a clear vision. They are aligned on what they are doing and why. But why is complicated? Why it's hard? Well, there are many reasons, but the most important I want to mention today is that it takes time to collaborate across discipline, because each discipline has different way of communicating, different vocabularies, different tools. They practice their practice for a while, and if they haven't collaborated before, it's really a different mindset. And so it's important for a discipline to adapt and adjust to a different way of thinking. So they need to come together, and the willingness to learn on communicating a different way. And what you see here from these comics that I've shown is that often when a team with different disciplines come together, they have in their mind a different view of what they need to do. So they think about the what I'm here. They have a different view of what they're doing. And what needs to change is they should come together and think about how they're going to solve a problem and have a clear, the same idea of what they are together, why they are together. And I want to share with you this famous tree swing analogy that is from the 1917 that shows how different disciplines, they might interpret the same requirement, which is designing a tree swing. And just the fact that this picture is more than 15 years ago made me think, because it means that cross-discipline collaboration, it's been a problem for quite a while. And what this picture shows is, starting from number one, is how the customer explained their requirement, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, and what the beta tester receive, and how the business consultant describe it. And you can see the other picture. They are all different. So they have in their mind a different picture, what they are doing. So yes, it's difficult, but what are the benefits and why should we bother about cross-discipline collaboration? I'm highlighting here just few of the reasons I think is important. They are important. And first of all is the fact that it saves time in the long run. So if a team work together from the beginning, early on, it can eliminate a lot of back and forth communication or challenge throughout the process. So they align what they want to do from the beginning. And it also helps to improve the communication among the team, because if they work together, they are more familiar with each other tools and style of communication. So each individual gets better at communicate among themselves. And it also brings better alignments when all the parties understand the rationale of their decision, their points of view. It gives everyone the ownership of the problem they're solving. And ultimately, it helps to utilize the divergent perspective. So each discipline brings their perspective, their way of doing, and that helps to solve the problem and ultimately helps to create a better solution and better results. So what I want to do now is to share with you the way that I improve cross-discipline collaboration in my experience, and it's mainly through the use of visual maps. Why? Because they help to share and compare information. They put information out there rather than in people's head, and they help everyone to see the problem in a way that transcend and integrate disciplinary boundaries. Something that I noticed that all the visual map I've used to foster cross collaboration, they had one thing in common. They had the problem and solution in the same map. So that was showing that connection clearly. And that really helps a team to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Rather than just have a list of features, they can see the problem that they solve and how. Like you see in this sign that I found on the web, and I thought it was quite inspiring, that really summarize what is the problem, pollution, and visualize a car, the cause of the pollution, and then shows the solution by using bicycle. Oops. So the first tool, visual maps, I want to share with you is called a lean canvas. A lean canvas is basically one-page business plan that help a business to deconstruct a business idea. And it's really the simplified version of the business plan model. And you can see that it helps really to put on paper the problem that the team is solving. You require, for instance, to list out the customer problems that the idea wants to solve with the solution, and also the key metrics. This is a tool that I've used in the past, and it was part of, mainly led by the product people, but I found it really useful to ensure that the teams come together and discuss what they are doing. The other tool that I've used is the opportunity solution tree. This is a tool that was popularized by Teresa Torres, a product discovery coach. She created these tools in 2016 as a way to help a product team to streamline a product discovery process and keep track of their continual discovery journey. So the way she described it is a way that the opportunity solution tree is a way of visualizing how a team wants to approach a desire, reach a desired outcome, and make sure that implicit assumptions are explicit, helps to align around our shared understandings and communicate how a team is going to reach a desired outcome. I've used this tool in the past. I found it that it requires a coach, really, a bit of more complexity to get it right. But I want to highlight here again the fact that it puts together in the same image the opportunity and the solution. Opportunity is the language that Teresa Torres used it to describe user pain points. So it's still a problem to solve. And here on the left side, I gave an example of what I mean by an opportunity. This example is taken from the book that Teresa Torres wrote, Continuous Discovery, and is for Netflix. So for instance, if the opportunity is to improve retention, the team wants to improve retention, and through user research, you found that the user of Netflix, they don't know what to watch, then a solution could be the user reviews, for instance. So that connection, opportunity or solution is clear and shared among the team. And this is a visual maps that you do together with your team, and you continuously improve it throughout the process. So now I want to share with you a case study, how I use visual maps to improve the collaboration for a redesign of the Mendeley search experience. Mendeley is a tool that Elsevier owns. So this case study is not from my time at Global Relay, but from my previous company, Elsevier. Elsevier is a publishing company that does tools and application for scientists and researchers. So here, just to give a bit of context of what is Mendeley, is a reference system used by millions of academic researchers to organize their research. They could use Mendeley to find articles that it's useful for their research, and also they can save it on the library. So Mendeley has a library where they can save the information in their library. And why we start working on the search redesign, mainly because we were tasked to think about how to increase content engagement. And the two metrics that we aim to move was the number of view for PDF and the add to library events. So when we start to work on the search redesign, we had to create a new teams, and because search is a complex project, is a complex design problem to solve, and requires highly technical team and cross-discipline collaboration. So there was a new team that was created, the Mendeley Discovery, and I was one of the designer researchers that founded the team. But we also had to collaborate with two different teams, the shared service and the data platform. And so basically we had three teams working together for the first time, about 21 people for one page. And you see that there was a lot of disciplines coming together for the first time and individuals coming together again for the first time. So what we did to show you visually the project overall. So in one here, we redesigned the search experience. We start off with a page that looked like more on the one you see on the left, which basically was a list of results. And after a year, this is what the team did. So visually more appealing, but also have features that support content engagement, such as the facet to find filtered results and improve visualization of each results. And also right side panel that gives an overview of the contents in the search result page rather than going somewhere else, as well as the autocomplete that is not visible in this image. So in one here, not only we improve the visual representation of this page, but we also managed to improve the content engagement of 400%. So it was really a successful redesign in terms of success, but also in terms of collaboration. And what I think it makes the collaboration of this team successful was the fact that we use a visual maps. And I'm going to tell you now how I got to that visual map. So, of course, what was important to me is to ensure that all the teams that was working on their search redesign knew the user and their pain points. So we start off by user research and by looking at what pain points the user were experiencing when using Mendeley. And what I'm showing here is a section of the experience map that I created to summarize the user session with Mendeley user. And as you can see here, it's quite a busy visualization. And I thought that that was not something that I could share with the team and could help us to understand what to do and what were the user pain points. So I summarize it for the team and for the senior stakeholder in something that looks like this. So it's especially the first part, the problem space, is the summary of the experience map. I wanted to make sure that all the team knew the phases of the search experience that the user were going through and the pain points. So this is really a super summary that was useful for the teams to understand what the user were and what pain points they were experiencing. And what you see here at the bottom are the feature to solve the pain points. The feature is something that we came up together as a team. Once everyone knew the user pain points, then we thought about, okay, how can we solve those problems? And to get a bit more deeper in the details, so in the search experience for Mendeley, we understood that when they start to search for information, even finding the time to search, it's pain point. And so the team, what we suggest was to have saved searches, for instance. And then moving on the next step of writing, when they actually write a search query, one of the pain points that we found out was that spelling and remembering what terms to use was a pain point. And so what we suggested to solve this problem was to have autocomplete and auto-suggest. And then when they find the information, evaluating if the search results is something that it's useful for them, it's something that takes time to make sense of what they found. And so what we suggest to improve that was highlighting the most important information that we knew were important for them through research, such as author, citation, and abstract. And then at the end of the process, when they decide when they found something that was useful for them, one of their pain points was access to the PDF and understanding where to save it. And so we made sure that the feature, what we suggest is to have a call to action to save to library and view PDF. So what this map was made also, it changed the view of the team about search. Everyone thought the search was a page, was designing a page. But through this map, we understood that we needed to approach it as a process. We were designing a process rather than a page. So now I want to give you a bit more information on how we use it, because it's not only coming up with a vision map, but what is important is to share it, co-create it, and working together, making sure there is a live document that everyone can question and can pitch in. So how we use this map. So this map was a way of understanding the user pain points and the solution. We use it also to plan the roadmap and create MVP, because it helped us to understand the feature that we needed to develop for search. And we kept sharing throughout the process regularly, every 2 weeks, every sprint, to review the progress of the team. And we also use it to onboard new team member as a way of understanding what this team was tasked to do, what we were doing. And it also, we use it to communicate with stakeholders. So this map really summarized what the team was doing, and made it easy for us to share and promote our project. So what are the benefits of using this map and this approach of visual map? So what is important, I think it was the benefit of using this approach was the fact that the team had awareness of the user points that we were solving. So we were sharing the problems that we were solving, not just a list of features. And so there was that understanding and ownership of the problems. And also create that connection between what we were doing and how, so the problem and the solution. And the fact that we involve the team to brainstorm on solution, how to solve the problem, help us to find the best way of solving the problems. It also guided our decision to prioritize feature. And it helped us to speak the same language and have a clear direction. Speak the same language, why? Because even the name that we were giving to feature was something important to ensure that we were talking about the same feature, the same language. So the lesson that I learned here is that maps are fantastic, really, to foster cross-discipline collaboration, mainly because they give ownership of the problem and the solution to the whole team and create that vision, create an alignment and share vocabularies. And also, it's not just about creating the map, so the what you put in the map, but how you use it. It needs to be a live document that you keep sharing and you involve people in the creation. So my suggestion on how to foster cross-discipline collaboration and team alignment is to create maps that have a clear visualization of the pain points and the solution. Co-creating whenever is possible, involve the other people, facilitate the discussion, share it and review it often throughout the process. And that's the end of the talk for me. Thank you so much. Let me know if you got any question.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm always a big fan of visualization of things, because I've had that problem of people with different, the bubbles with the different visions of a chair. I've had that happen so often. Great. And I did love the quote that I think I love the most in your talk was we weren't designing a page, we're designing a process. I think that's something that is so relatable to so many people out there, because often you think you're just designing something small, but it's actually how does that fit in the user's journey and how are they going to use it. One thing I have a question on, and please do, if you have any questions, please do write them in either on UXDX or whichever channel you're watching this through. But my question to get things started is around the longevity of these maps. So let's say you're working on this feature. What happens next? So you have this map you've done. Do you archive that somewhere? Do you leave it available for people? And how do people keep track when you're on to feature 20 or whichever?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So in the case of the case study I shared, basically that we use that map until we completed the feature that were present in that map. And so that was the longevity until the plan was done. But in this specific case, after we did the Mendeley search redesign, I moved in another team, a platform team that was aimed to improve the search experience across different products. And I shared this map with other teams that were approaching the search experience. and ask them to create their own map and fill them with their own information. They found it useful. I was really pleased that that structure was functioning, was working also for other teams, and help them to approach the search experience in the same way, not as a page, not as a components that the tech guy can do it, but as a we need to work together, design, product, and tech people, the product trio. That concept for me was super important. You need to have that collaboration. And so I found that to create that map really help everyone to understand that search as a problem is not only for tech people. It needs to solve problems. So yeah.
Brilliant. And you mentioned kind of lean canvas. One of the things I always struggled with is trying to find the right level. So sometimes I've seen a lean canvas can work really well at almost like a new product level, but sometimes it's a bit overkill for a new feature or something in an existing product. So what levels do you find? Do you find something similar, or do you believe that you can use these tools at any level?
Yes. So the other tools I mentioned before, the lean canvas and the tree, the opportunity tree, it's something that we use it at the beginning of the search redesign. I think what is important is to play around with different tools, because by playing around with those tools, I thought, okay, I think I need to create something that is mine, that works for this particular project. So you see that it's inspired by those tools with product and solution together, but it's completely different. It's something that I did it specifically for this project. So I think we, as a practitioner, we should know what is out there, but then change what we need according to our needs.
Great. And I don't know if you were inspired, but it looked to me like it was almost heading towards a user story map. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. It is, but I think this user experience map could be a bit too overwhelming. What I think it was powerful in this visualization was the fact that it was super simple. It was really the minimum bare information there, and it almost asked for information. And so it fostered that collaboration. What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Laura. I found that really useful. I hope people out there did as well. So thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Great. So that brings us to the end for today. But if you did like this session and you like the concept of cross-team collaboration, that's what UXDX is all about. So we're all about bringing product, UX, design, and dev together. So this is kind of a sample of the types of things that we do at our main conferences. And we run a conference in USA in May, and we also run one in Dublin in October. So coming up in New York, we have 25 plus speakers. We've actually upgraded it to 12 workshops. There'll be 500 people there. So if you did like what you saw today, please do consider joining us in either New York or Dublin. But if not, I look forward to seeing you at the next UXDX Online. Thank you very much.